There is a map in a museum in Istanbul. It was drawn in 1513 on a piece of gazelle skin. It is 90 centimeters wide and 63 centimeters tall, and in the bottom left corner there is a landmass that, according to the official historical record, should not exist for another 307 years. Now, before I go any further, I need to ask you something directly. Drop your answer in the comments below. If the evidence I'm about to show you suggests that someone knew about Antarctica centuries before its supposed discovery, do you think the explanation is a lost civilization, a forgotten maritime tradition, or something else entirely? Tell me what you think. I'll be reading the comments. Because here is what I kept running into as I pulled on this thread. It didn't start with the map. It started with what happened to the people who tried to document the discovery. I wasn't looking for this. I was researching the cartographic history of the Southern Hemisphere, genuinely dry stuff, trying to understand how Renaissance mapmakers dealt with the unknown South. I was looking at the way blank space functions in early modern maps. What goes in the corners when no one has been there? That was the question. And then I found the Williams. HMS Williams was a brig, a small merchant vessel, 216 tons, 25 meters long. In January of 1820, it carried a Royal Navy surveyor named Edward Bransfield to the bottom of the known world. And on January 30th of that year, at latitude 64 degrees south, Bransfield and his crew saw mountains, snow-covered peaks, not ice, not a shelf, mountains, rock. Midshipman Charles Pointer, who was aboard, wrote these exact words in his journal. "We were astonished by the discovery of land." He continued, "We can positively assert that we saw land in 64 degrees south, still trending to the eastward." Bransfield named it Trinity Land. He drew charts, he made reports, and then he sailed home. That is the first confirmed documented sighting of the Antarctic mainland, January 30th, 1820. And the logbook of the Williams, the primary source record of that voyage, has never been found. It disappeared. It does not exist in any archive in the world. That alone would be a footnote. Logs get lost, ships burn, archives flood. I told myself that when I found it. I moved on. But then I found Bellingshausen. Fabian Gottlieb von Bellingshausen was a captain in the Imperial Russian Navy. On January 27, 1820, 3 days before Bransfield's sighting, his ships Vostok and Mirny reached the Antarctic coast. He recorded seeing, in his words, ice mountains, and what appeared to be land at approximately 69 degrees 21 minutes south. Modern scholarship now widely accepts that Bellingshausen's sighting was the first, by days, by the slimmest margin in the history of exploration. His original expedition journals and manuscripts were never published in their original form. They disappeared. Historian Rip Bulkley, who received the Anderson Medal from the Society of Nautical Research for his investigation into this very question, concluded after years of archival work that there are, in his words, reasonable doubts about the Russian claim, in part because the primary documents no longer exist in verifiable form. 2 men, 2 nations, 2 independent, near-simultaneous sightings of the same continent. The primary documents for both, gone. This is where most people telling this story get it wrong. They jump straight to the Piri Reis map and start talking about ancient civilizations and lost technology. And that framing, the dramatic leap, is exactly what causes serious historians to dismiss the entire question. So let me be precise about what the map actually says and what it doesn't. The Piri Reis map was drawn by Ottoman Admiral Ahmed Muhiddin Piri in 1513. He was explicit about his sources. His own handwritten marginal notes, still readable on the map today, list 20 charts and mappae mundi, 8 Ptolemaic maps, 4 Portuguese regional charts, an Arabic map of India, and, critically, a map drawn by Columbus. That last source no longer exists. Not a single confirmed map drawn by Columbus has ever been recovered. The Piri Reis map is currently our best evidence that Columbus's maps existed at all. The map was found on October 9, 1929, by a German theologian named Gustav Adolf Deissmann, who was cataloging the Topkapi Palace Library as it was being converted to a museum. He found it folded inside a collection of documents. It had been sitting there, unidentified for roughly 4 centuries. Now, the controversy. There is a landmass on the southern edge of the Piri Reis map. Popular YouTube channels, best-selling books, and countless documentaries have claimed, loudly, that this landmass is Antarctica, depicted without its ice cap, drawn by a civilization that no longer exists. I want to be careful here because I spent a significant amount of time with this specific claim. It collapses. Here is exactly why. Antarctica has not been ice-free for over 10 million years. Not 4,000 years ago. Not 17,000 years ago. Over 10 million years. Modern ice core data from the Antarctic ice sheet confirms this. Any civilization that could have mapped a coastline-free Antarctica would need to predate all known human history by a factor of about 2,000. The popular version of this story leans on a 1966 book by Charles Hapgood, a University of New Hampshire professor, who believed Antarctica was partially ice-free as recently as 4000 BC. Subsequent geological research has shown that date range to be wrong by a factor of roughly 2,500. Hapgood also had to rotate his comparison overlays by 20 degrees and rescale the landmass to make the shapes align. That is not evidence. That is selection. And yet, the landmass is there, on a 1513 map, drawn by someone working from sources he himself said were ancient. And Piri Reis was not the only one. In 1531, a French mathematician and royal astronomer named Oronce Finet, known to Latin scholars as Orontius Phineus, published a world map. On it, occupying the southern reaches of the globe, is a detailed continent. It has rivers, it has valleys, it has an interior. Its inscription reads, Terra Australis, recently discovered but not yet fully known. Finet drew the coastline of a continent that sits roughly where Antarctica sits. He labeled it as something recently discovered. In 1531, 289 years before official discovery. Now, historians of cartography, and they are correct to note this, point out that Terra Australis was a philosophical convention in Renaissance mapmaking. The ancient Greek geographer Ptolemy had proposed that a southern landmass must exist to balance the weight of the continents in the northern hemisphere. This was theoretical geography. Cartographers drew in what they believed logic demanded. I want to be fair to that explanation because it is a real and documented part of the history of mapmaking. But here is what I keep coming back to. Finet's map does not label Terra Australis as theoretical. He labels it as recently discovered. Not imagined, not speculated, discovered. And those two words on that 1531 map sit in direct tension with the claim that no one reached Antarctica until 1820. There's a man I want you to know about. His name was Andrei Kapitsa. He was a Soviet geographer who, in 1959 and 1964, conducted seismic soundings beneath the Antarctic ice sheet at Vostok Station, a Soviet research station sitting in the coldest reliably measured place on the surface of the Earth, at minus 89.2 degrees Celsius. From those measurements, Kapitsa became the first person to seriously propose that there was a liquid freshwater lake of enormous size sealed beneath the ice. Not on the surface, not near the coast, underneath the ice, 4 kilometers below the surface. A lake the size of Lake Ontario, in total darkness, under pressures of 350 atmospheres, sealed from the atmosphere for somewhere between 15 and 25 million years. No one believed him for decades. In 1974, British scientists conducting an airborne radar survey recorded strange flat signals beneath the exact location Kapitsa had identified. In 1991, a European satellite called ERS-1 confirmed it. On June 20, 1996, the journal Nature published the paper, Lake Vostok Was Real. It is now known to be the largest of 675 identified subglacial lakes beneath Antarctica. There are rivers down there, interconnected networks of water moving silently beneath miles of ice. Andrei Kapitsa died in 2011. On February 5, 2012, Russian scientists drilled through 3,766 meters of ice and breached Lake Vostok for the first time in human history. Kapitsa died less than 1 year before they reached it. He never got to see it. The water that rose up through the borehole and froze, sealing the hole like a plug, had last touched open air approximately 15 million years ago. It is, by every meaningful measure, the most isolated body of water ever accessed by a human being. What I find myself returning to, and I need to be honest about what troubled me most as I worked through all of this, is not any single anomaly. It is the pattern of what disappears. Columbus drew maps. We have a 1513 copy of something derived from those maps. The originals are gone. Bransfield reached Antarctica on January 30th, 1820. His ship's log is gone. Bellingshausen may have reached it 3 days earlier. His original manuscript is gone. Kapitsa identified a lake the size of Ontario sealed beneath 4 kilometers of ice in 1959. No one took him seriously for 35 years. The evidence was in the data the whole time. Plausible. Each loss. Explainable. But together, what they describe is a record with extraordinary gaps, precisely where the most consequential information would be. Let me compress what I've been describing, because it helps to see it as a sequence. The 4th century BC, Aristotle reasons, based on geometry alone, that a southern continent must exist to balance the northern landmasses. He names it, theoretically, the Antipodes. The 1st century AD, the Roman geographer Ptolemy codifies this idea in his Geographia. A southern continent becomes a permanent fixture in educated European cosmology. Not discovered, theorized. 1492. Christopher Columbus makes his first transatlantic voyage. He begins drawing maps. Every single one disappears. 1513. Piri Reis, working from Columbus's lost maps and 19 other sources, some dating to the 4th century BC, draws a world map. In the southern Atlantic, there is a landmass. Its source cannot be identified. 1531. Oronce Finet publishes his world map, a continent in the south, labeled as recently discovered. 1770s, Captain James Cook crosses the Antarctic Circle. He comes within sight of ice shelves. He never sees continental land. January 27, 1820, Bellingshausen records seeing ice cliffs and land-like features at 69 degrees 21 minutes south. His original journals will later disappear. January 30th, 1820, Bransfield confirms rock and mountains. His ship's log disappears. 1929, a German theologian in Istanbul finds the Piri Reis map folded inside a stack of documents. It has been there, unread, for 4 centuries. 1959 to 64, Andrei Kapitsa proposes a subglacial lake beneath Vostok Station. No one takes it seriously. 1966, Charles Hapgood publishes his Antarctica theory. It spreads. The inaccurate version of the story begins to dominate. The verifiable anomalies, the missing logs, the 1531 inscription, the unidentifiable source, get buried under the noise of ancient aliens and lost Atlantis. June 20th, 1996, Lake Vostok is confirmed in Nature. Antarctica has a secret interior that was invisible to everyone for the entire history of human exploration. February 5th, 2012, the lake is breached. 15 million years of isolation ends in a single evening at 8:25 Moscow time. The continent itself had been hiding in plain sight, under the ice. Go back to the map. It is still in Istanbul. You can go see it. It sits in the Topkapi Palace Museum in a climate-controlled case, 90 centimeters wide, painted in colors that have not faded in more than 500 years. The gazelle skin is still supple. The Ottoman Turkish annotations are still legible to anyone who can read them. The landmass in the southern corner is still there, unexplained by any source that has ever been recovered. In his own notes, Piri Reis says the map was compiled from sources dating to the time of Alexander the Great. He says one of those sources was a map drawn by Columbus, a map that no longer exists. He says the information came to him through a chain of cartographers he could not fully identify. He is telling you, on the map itself, that he does not know where some of this came from. There is a difference between a continent being unknown and a continent being undocumented. I've been thinking about that difference for a long time now. The ice was always there. Lake Vostok was always there. The subterranean rivers were always there. Humans simply did not have instruments capable of registering what existed below the surface. The question that stays with me, and I cannot answer it, is not whether someone reached Antarctica before 1820. The question is this: where does a 16th century Ottoman admiral find a source map that places a landmass in the southern Atlantic? And what happened to every primary document that might have explained where that knowledge came from? The Williams log is missing. Bellingshausen's manuscript is missing. Columbus's maps are missing. The source maps Piri Reis used, missing. Archives don't forget. People destroy them. If this video made you look at the history of Antarctic discovery differently, and I hope it did, then take a second and subscribe. I come back to questions like this one regularly. Questions where the official record and the documented record don't quite match up. Where the gaps in the archive are as interesting as what survives. There is a great deal more to cover. And before you go, I want to leave you with the question I cannot shake.